Democratic Alliance is calling for action to be taken against some cabinet ministers and for the Standing Committee on the Financial Management of Parliament to do its oversight work. This comes after a meeting that seeking answers about the fire at Parliament had to be postponed because Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, Police Minister Bheki Cele and Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Patricia Lille were, quote, unavailable. What else do we need to know about this? Let's bring in the DA spokesperson, Siviwe, Gwarube, who's with us via our video link. Siviwe, always great chatting to you. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I mean, as a start, what reasons, or any, were you given behind why this meeting couldn't go ahead?
Good morning, Ayanda. Look, I mean, this meeting firstly was set for Friday, and it was scheduled since last week, the week before that Friday. And there were a number of things that, as the chief whips, we had said that we wanted addressed in this meeting that we were now meant to have. One of the big things that I had personally called for was that there seems to be an exclusion of the role of the South African Police Service in this whole debacle around the Parliament fire, and that we needed the Minister of Police to come and at least give an account of what has happened and give an update on what the situation is with regards to the suspects that has been apprehended. And so really it was an important meeting because the Minister of Police has yet to say anything about the Parliament fire since it broke out on the 2nd of January. And so the night before we get an email that just simply says apologies for the inconvenience, but this meeting has been cancelled. And so we took it upon ourselves to ask the chairs that what is the actual reasons, and we were only told at the literal 11th hour that it was due to the fact that the ministers were unavailable. And now, I mean, this is yet again proof that, one, the executive does not take the role of Parliament very seriously. Number two, that even the chairs themselves, don't understand what the role of the actual bodies that they chair is about. Because you simply can't accept an excuse that we're not available at the 11th hour. We've been told via the grapevine that many of those ministers were actually at the ANC NEC meeting. And so that is a massive slap on the face for many South Africans who were expecting answers about why Parliament went up in flames, and who are expecting accountability. And so ministers can't simply choose not to come and account to Parliament. And so that is the big contention here, that there's a misunderstanding of what Parliament is meant to do, and also that we need to get to the bottom of what has happened and hold those who are accountable.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm reminded of one of the things that emerged from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, this idea that Parliament itself seemingly didn't come to the party, at least insofar as its oversight work is concerned. The sense I'm getting from you is it actually is a two-way street. It appears that the executive, too, has developed some kind of culture of not being forthcoming with the work that Parliament needs to do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's been, over the last 10 years or so in South Africa, a sense of what I would call executive impunity, where people sometimes feel as though because they're part of the executive, they don't have to answer to Parliament. And I think that it's either because there's just a genuine misunderstanding of why the executive and the legislature need to work in lockstep, or it's a convenient way of saying, I don't have to answer to elected representatives, which of course goes against the very democratic principles of our constitutional democracy. And to the point that you make, about the state capture, I mean, this is a point that I make to the Speaker in the letter to her repeatedly, that one of the things that was raised by two presiding officers of Parliament, both Ms. Baleka Mbete and Ms. Thandi Modise, was that Parliament essentially aided and abetted state capture by not doing its job. And so really, when you look at the report on state capture, it is, yes, the people who are implicated, but it's very much the national legislature too that is actually on the dock, because that's where the buck stops, and there was literally no line of defense there. We can't allow that to happen again. When things like this happen, we've got to get to the bottom of it. While there's work to be done around finding alternative venues for Parliament to go on, but at the same time, we need to ask ourselves, how does a building go up in flames without any proper answers? And so that is one of the things that we need to push for.
Yeah, and you've really just preempted my next question. I mean, there are still so many questions around what on earth took place that day. Which of those do you reckon need the most urgent attention?
Well, three things need to be answered, and that's why our view is that actually Parliament needs to form a multi-party parliamentary inquiry that will look at these three specific things. Number one, we need to understand what was the role of the Parliamentary Protection Services, because Parliament has its own people who guard the national key point, whose job it is to look after the national key point. What was their role? We've heard competing accounts from Nehao, some of them saying some of them were asked to stay at home and that there were not enough people on site. So we need to get an understanding of what that is about. We need to get an account from SAPS, because of course they are responsible for guarding the national key point at 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so how is it that one sole man, according to the accounts of what we've seen, was able to gain entry into a heavily guarded institution and simply walk into the building of Parliament and allegedly start some fires? And so there needs to be a massive inquiry there by SAPS themselves, how this was allowed to happen. And then, of course, the other question, which has been rather ventilated thus far, is the role of public works. Were these buildings maintained? Did we have all the fire prevention mechanisms in place? And so all of these three things, Ayanda, need to be looked at together and not in a piecemeal fashion, so that we can get those answers and we can be able to see if there's been a multi-system failure. People must be held accountable. But what we can't have is a simple data dumping of presentations, which departments in the executive love, of emailing presentations when nothing comes from it. And so that's why we're absolutely animated by this, and that we need to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. My understanding that the DA has now undertaken a decision to write to the chair of chairs. That's Cedric Frolic, if my memory serves me well. What kind of intervention are you hoping will come out of that?
So two things. I mean, the one is having written to the leader of government business, who's the deputy president. And the idea there is that the leader of government business becomes the liaison between the executive and members of parliament. And so when you are experiencing problems, you are meant to be able to report to the leader of government business so that he can rectify it, to say that we're having issues and challenges with dealing with the executive here in the parliamentary space. Now, writing to the chair of chairs is a matter of trying to address what I raised earlier about the seeming misunderstanding by the two co-chairs who chair this meeting on parliamentary financial management, who don't understand that you simply can't accept on behalf of a large group of people a flimsy excuse the night before that says, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable. That they need to be also told what is their role. Take them through what the rules of parliament says. And that you're chairing this meeting on behalf of various political parties. It's extremely important, and that accountability is actually the reason why those committees exist. And so it's quite important that, as the chair of chairs, Mr. Cedric Frolic, has a conversation with the committee to say your role is important, and this is why it is important. So those two action steps are quite important. And of course, writing to the Speaker to say, I mean, this is bad form. The Speaker is quite new and still building a lot of goodwill with a number of political parties. She can't snub Parliament for party, obligations, if that is in fact the case.
Yeah, important story that we'll keep watching. Siviwe Gwarube, thank you for your time. Really do appreciate it. Siviwe is the spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance.